All right. Well, good morning, Greg, and good morning to our guest, Clark Deaver. I really appreciate you hopping on here. Newest member to the Arcadia Cognerati Advisory Board. Awesome guy. And thank you so much for reaching out and coming up with this great idea for the show.
Oh, well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Greg, for hosting me. I'm, long time listener, first time caller. So excited to be here.
That's great.
There
I've
we
known
go.
I've known Clark for a long time, and I'm in love with his brain, and I want to make love to his brain. So it's going to take a long time to get out all of those incredible ideas that you have, Clark. You know that I'm a huge fan.
Thank you, sir.
So yeah, actually, well, yeah, well, our listeners have probably heard the Braid Babes podcast. That's actually Clark. That was an introduction from you, Clark. Another one of your amazing introductions. So, Clark, you got a ton of you got great entrepreneurial business background. You have a tech background and done work in VR and AR and all kinds of stuff. So you're super smart guy. We got introduced a while back, and then you actually came to one of our courses, and so we love hanging out with you. And then of course you accepted our invitation to be part of the advisory board and all the new big stuff we have going
Which
on
made
this
us
year.
suspicious.
Yeah,
because you're
at that
smarter than
point,
both Brian and I, so we were really worried about that. We're like, why would this really smart guy like us?
I don't believe in like general intelligence. Like there's domain intelligence, right? I'm smarter on a few things. You guys are definitely smarter in your domain.
That's hilarious.
I was gonna say, to return the love a little bit, like when I attended your course, it was like so eye-opening for me because it was strategies and tactics and things that I had learned over my career, and it was just formalized and it had a language around it, and it got me so excited, and that's what turned me into a big fan. And it was interesting because I do have some like defense experience as a contractor and working with some special operations folks, but I was never in the military or law enforcement. And so coming from a kind of a civilian background and learning the way that you guys think from a pattern recognition and analysis standpoint was just really eye-opening for me, and I'm grateful for it. And I hope that today we can kind of cross the streams, if you will, like in Ghostbusters. And
let's do it. I appreciate that, and that's why we loved what you reached out with us, a bunch of questions and an idea for the show. So I will kind of actually let you start off here and go ahead with some of the questions and what you brought up and kind of what you were thinking behind it, but and sort of let you go down the list if that works.
Okay, yeah, that works for me. So what I wanted to bring to the audience was the idea that these ideas of establishing a baseline and looking for anomalies, and then detecting patterns and coming up with what's the most likely and most dangerous course of action, like all of those things are applicable in the business world. And so I use them both from recruiting and hiring to management, to looking at partnerships and deals and all of those sort of things. So one of the first interesting points that I wanted to bring to the team, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, Brian, but like one of the things that always struck me was people are always communicating, they're always broadcasting.
Yep.
And so one of the first tricks that I learned early in my career during the interview process was basically I'm biased to hire people who bring notebooks with them. And especially if I met you not in an interview, like we met for coffee and you had a notebook, that is a giant signal for me. And I think one of the things that it shows is that the person you're speaking to understands like the fallibility of their brain, right? And that like it's just this mushy potato that sometimes holds things momentarily but not very well. And then they have discipline and process orientation, right? Like, so I know that I have this shortcoming as a biological creature. So how can I use tools to augment that and build a process around it that's repeatable? And then the last thing that that it indicates to me often is that they're creators, right? Most of the world is consumers of information, but I find, again, like looking at it from a kind of pattern recognition standpoint, like people who take notes tend to be the builders and the doers, because they're constantly absorbing the information around them. And then, if they're kind of next level, they synthesize that. And that's what drives a lot of their creative process.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And I would say this though, Clark, and I'm not trying to build consensus. I'm just trying to say what I've seen. So
Yep.
if you're letting your note-taking material get in the way, I've seen people that were so fastidious that they were down and in writing and missed the gist of what you were trying to say. Because most people speak in parables or stories or allegories, right? And here we are starting to speak, and the person goes, fuck, that was a great one. And you could see him go nose down and start writing it down. And we joke Brianisms, Gregisms, Clarkisms. We each have certain things that pop into our head, and we want the three on the call to just say those things. And when we're around other smart people, we don't hold back. And so now, if you're one of those people that carries very detailed notes and you write in size 6 Helvetica, even in your moleskin, then you might miss the rest of the world. So come up for air sometime. But I completely agree with you. And I think it can be used like Harry Potter's wand. Because when we were at the ranch, Shelley and I owned the Powderhorn Guest Ranch, south of Powderhorn, north of Lake City for 13 years. And it was an incredible time because we kept all the balls in the air, all of our training, all of our trips, all of our journeys, everything was going while we entertained, guests from Sunday to Saturday in every adventure that you can imagine. Well, the problem is that sometimes I bite off more than I can chew, evidenced by my endomorph. But also, the only place on the ranch that we could eat food that was being cooked was at the ranch house, which is at the center of the ranch. So I'm in charge of the ranch hand, Shelley's head wrangler. We've got a bunch of things going with the guests. And I had to wake up, get from my house all the way down to the ranch house to get some breakfast and then go on my day. So I came up with the clever scheme of a clipboard. If I had the clipboard and I had my phone, now understand that the phone didn't work for 36 miles in a circle. There was no phone coverage or whatever. We had to buy an FM radio station to communicate with like the Jeeps and the rafting and everything. So I would hold my cell phone up. Oh, that's precious. And I would write on the clipboard and I would walk right through the crowd. Nobody would interrupt me. And it was all a dodge. There was nobody on the phone. It was a flip phone. For the love of God, somebody would have seen through that. And with the clipboard. So I would say a couple of things. I would say, one, you're brilliant. Two, I too have a bias for organized people. But I would say, three, make sure the fix isn't in, right? Make sure they're not using urban masking or social camouflage just to act a lot smarter. I would look in there and make sure they're not reading Vanity Fair, right?
Oh,
and then the last part of that is don't take such fastidious notes that you're tuning out the speaker, right? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No. Please go ahead and respond to that, Clark.
I was excited. I was excited because you brought up social proofing, Greg. And this is just like from the social engineer's toolbox. And this is the other thing. When we start talking about cross domains in business, a lot of social engineering falls under the marketing channel, And so one of the ways that we think about that is, at a point in my career, I was a commercial photographer and I shot a lot of bands, very, like famous bands in the scenes I was in. And I referred to my camera as my VIP pass, right? Because I had $5,000 worth of camera hanging around my neck. Right. And if you've been in the scene, like, whether it's someone's like Digital Rebel hobbyist or, it's like the real deal. And I could walk past any security guard without a VIP pass almost any day of the week. And if they checked me, I would just go into this mode where I would just be like, I got to get back there. They're waiting for me. They're trying to go, and you just most security in those situations are like minimum wage workers and they just don't want to get yelled at. And I wouldn't yell at them. I would just say that the boss is going to come. And so you got to let me through. And 9 times out of 10, they would.
Clark, where do we allow photographers between us and the game on the floor, right outside of the parquet floor where the people are playing and the guy's wiping up the sweat? And guess what? They disappear to us. We don't even pay attention to them. After a few seconds or a few minutes of them being right in front of us and getting in that Politico meeting and all that other stuff, we tune them out. So that's brilliant. That's a great strategy. If you're a terrorist or a criminal, please don't use that TTP. Or if you do, credit to Clark and not Arcadia.
or if you work security, don't
fall for that.
The rules and make sure that they have a pass and don't let them in if they don't have a pass.
No, that's a good one. it's funny because I've almost used that to cruise at the hotel, the Chateau Marmont up in LA in Hollywood there, and almost buffaloed my way in there by doing the I'm not on the I work for, and I could see the name of the company that had the event list on there. I said, I work for the company this. My name's not on the list. I help make the list, right? So I was doing that and I almost had them going, but they took, I was like 21 or 20, you know what I mean? So I was like not passing as my buddies there too. They're kind of looking at us and they saw the short haircuts because I was still in the Marine Corps and they're like, yeah, I don't think so. So but if it just like he was thinking he didn't want to lose his
Right.
job there, going, oh, this is like one of the guys that organized the event. So it was kind of funny, but the note taking, it just Greg hit it, and I agree
No,
too. Like, 'cause
let me throw this
hit
one at you, Brian.
when I do it with the notes and stuff, like I always make sure, like if you read my notes that I
Yes.
take, you'd be like, what the like, it wouldn't make any sense to you because they're for me. So like Greg said, I got to get in, what are you trying to say, and then I'll write down stuff that I
Right.
remember or I need, right, versus the some people that just like, hang on, how do you spell that word, and I'm like, all right, we're never going to get through this conversation. Like,
No, but listen,
yeah.
talk about right drawing. All three of us draw. We write notes,
Yeah,
and then we
and then
draw
yeah,
little explications, and then have arrows connecting different ideas because we understand how chaotic our brains are. But that drives what you just said, Brian. You brought up something great that hit on Clark's saying about creativity. People that carry notebooks are creative. I've got yellow pads at every corner of the house because I don't want to forget something. And here later in the game, I've got them next to the bed because some of the greatest thinking, I wake up
so,
in bed and I go, holy crap, that's a good idea. And I write it down. Now, there's an equal number of Napoleon
bad ones,
Dynamite
yeah.
ideas, right, that come
Yeah.
from that. But I don't sort them out in the moment. I wait and let them germinate.
So
And to the creativity, Brian, the reason that you were drawn to bullshit your way through that is because we love challenging our environment.
yeah,
Now, there's the type of bullshit that a person turns on to rob you or rape you or break down your defenses. But creative people fall on both sides, right? Good, bad, dark,
yep,
light. And what happens to us, I mean, good and evil, and not some veiled reference to some other shit. But the idea is that when you come into a room, I'm constantly trying to outthink everybody else in that room. And I'm staying quiet enough because I know I'm not the smartest person in the room. So I'm letting you transmit. Give me a body of work. Tell me where you're coming from. Now, Clark, you've seen me in action too. So you know that I've got rocks that I throw in the pond, right? And the entire idea is to elicit responses so then I can jump on those. But I think all creative people are like that. And Brian, I think yours started
no,
very early on the
I
street.
and I had to, well, and to show what I have to do now is literally, I'll show you guys. So my yellow notepad is
Yeah.
for my like our business side meetings, anything that I'm doing throughout the day on our calls. The white notepad right here is just for podcasts. So anything we're recording a podcast, I use the white notepad. And then I've got a green post-its are
There
like my
we go.
no, these are my personal, like to do things like taxes, pay
Yeah.
the, light bill, those kind of things. Orange one is for, list of, oh, make sure email so and so, follow up my daily tasks. And pink, guess, Greg, what the pink one is for?
That
Things I
means
got
you
to
live
talk,
near Home Depot.
things I got to talk to Greg about. I'll go on the
That's
pink one.
wonderful.
You know
Oh
what I
my
mean?
God,
So
they're
it's like,
pink.
yeah,
Listen, I wasn't smart enough to pick it up, but I get it.
but
I'm
now.
that's because
surprised
that's
how small that pink note is, Brian. I'm
well,
surprised how
it's
small the
it's
pink
it's
note
a
is.
Got
thick
many
pad
of
of them
them.
though. So it's, but no, that, and because that forces me, because if I don't do that, I won't, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and go, fuck, I got to go do this. And then
Yep.
I'll have to get up and go do it because I won't get back to sleep because I forgot about, I have to do
But
this.
both of us, and Clark, I bet you're the same way. The other night, Brian and I have been on the road. We just got back late last night, early call this morning. You know how it is, and you're fatigued, right? And your mental juices aren't as good. So last Friday night, before traveling out on an early Saturday flight, it was probably 2 a.m. And Shelly says, "What's the matter?" I said, "I got to go down and write that thank you note." So I went down and wrote a thank you note to two folks that we dealt with in Pennsylvania, and told them how amazed I was at a meeting that I had with one of their minions earlier in the day. And Shell said, "That's great. I'm glad that you did that because it's been bothering you." Well, what bothered me about it is I put myself in their shoes and I said, "You know what? That meeting was Friday and we haven't heard anything from this ass. Let's make that extra. I think we still write notes. I think we still write thank you cards. I think we make sure that we take the time. Like I'm not on social media, so I do email, but I answer every email. And I know, Brian, you do that. Clark, how do you feel about that?
So a couple things, like I think that process orientation is important. One of the things that I've been working on personally is like, if I have that late night anxiety about an action, right,
Yeah.
Yes.
is I try and document it. So the tool that I've been using, and it's not pen and paper, but it's called Obsidian. It's obsidian.md.
Yeah.
If you want to go check it out. It's great. It's like my second brain. And so if I get up and, if I'm having anxiety in the middle of the night, I can pull out my phone. I put a little to do in my, my note for tomorrow,
Yep.
That's great.
and then I can go to sleep.
Yep.
So offloading and breaking those open loops that you're just cycling
Yeah.
through in your head, very important. And along with that, I recommend to anyone who doesn't meditate, spend some time
Oh,
meditating,
yeah.
because you will
Look,
realize like how noisy
I was gonna
your
say,
brain
or
is.
bourbon. Bourbon's good
Yeah,
for
well,
for getting
and now fentanyl. But
Yeah.
listen, Clark is the same age as I am. Just look at the benefits of offloading some of that information through process orientation and doing yoga. So yeah, I'm shit because I didn't get to any of that. Do you think on the late 70s, early 80s, as a
Yeah.
copper in Detroit,
Yeah,
they
no
go,
one
hey,
was-
yoga? Yoga was the guy we were chasing, maybe.
Yeah.
The call sign for the suspect. Come on.
Yeah.
We're never going to get through this list, but it's a great list.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you
Yeah.
let's jump to the second one, Clark. Go ahead and
Okay,
let's
well,
get
there was a couple more points I wanted to make,
Okay.
since we're talking
Yeah,
about
no,
hiring right
you
now.
can't.
We're talking about hiring.
Yeah.
Along with the notebook, one of the things that I hire for, so I think of technical threshold, cultural objective, right? So I view employees as a 3 to 5 year, time span that we're most likely going to get together. That's the
Yep.
ideal for me. So in 3 to 5 years, I can't change your personality as a human, right?
Right.
And so, but I can teach you a ton of tactics and procedures and things like that that'll make you better at whatever the technical component of your job is. And so I bias very heavily towards making sure this is someone I want to work with,
Yes.
right? Like, regardless of if they're a rock star or not, like, do I want to spend 40 hours a week with this human? And so one of the ways that I do that, Greg mentioned, is throwing rocks in the pond. So early in the interview process, I will break down social stigmas. I will drop curse words. I will say whatever, because I'm the hiring manager, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to be on good behavior. And I see how they calibrate and respond, right? And I'm not looking for them necessarily to curse back, but if they do, how do they do it, right? Like, is it
Right.
comfortable? Is it uncomfortable? What are they? So I'm looking at the behavioral, the body language, and the way that they are communicating and their level of discomfort, because that's how I communicate in my world. Is very openly and freely, and I'm always looking for people who are willing to beat up ideas but not each other, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a great benefit to having diverse teams that attack the idea to create the best thing for the company. So and one last little tip for how I hire is one of the interview questions I ask is like, all right, so you're an accountant. Do you love what you do? Oh yeah, I love what I do. Cool. What are some personal projects where you've used your skills, right? It doesn't matter. So usually with engineers, like, I can talk about software and code, and they all, like the ones that I hire build stuff all the time at home out of the love. But even, I say accounting because you'd be like, what's an accountant do? It's like they volunteer at their church to do it. They work on their kids' soccer leagues books or whatever. People who really love their practice do it outside of the office, and it's a great like bandpass filter for the type of hiring that I do.
No, that's great. And Brian just told the person this on, I have no idea, it's Friday, right? So it would have been Thursday, probably Wednesday afternoon. It's specific that we had just met these people, and they were talking about problem solving and sense making out of order, not sense making problem solve, but problem solving sense making. And they had confronted a big problem. And Brian stepped in and said, look, you're making this about the person. Don't make it about the person, make it about the problem. So you could turn that to what you just said, and don't make it about the person, make it about the process. So you're trying to unpack that human by ways of their demonstrations of intent rather than just the words. Because people are going to tell you, look, it's like the first date. It's like the first few dates. They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear, but then you're going to be sadly mistaken if you don't unpack that a little bit and say, okay, let's go into a greater level of detail.
And the behavior-based stuff are great. And sometimes I seem to go wrong. I've been in, interview process before, and it was, give me a time when you were put, and it's like, okay, like that can be a really easy question to answer, or it can be a really, really difficult one. And they're not really clear, but I think for that interview is kind of part of the point of it. You're trying to see what you're going to bring up, but it's also gives you the ability to have a really canned response. And, I don't I don't like canned responses if I'm really trying to get to know someone. So I'll take like sort of the opposite side. If you're talking about interviewing someone, so I know someone, I'm just trying to keep it scrub any details in my mind here as I'm telling the story, but they're in a hiring process for like, say, a program management type position, right? But they didn't have any experience in this specific industry. And the company kind of understood that, and they were actually internally thinking of doing the right thing of why don't we just hire people with these sort of attributes and qualities, and we'll train them to do this specific job.
Yeah.
So they're in the right mindset, which I love. I love when people do that. They're like, hey, we can train you how to do this. I'm just looking for these key qualities. And so the person being interviewed, who I know is like, okay, and they're saying, well, you don't have this, but you could tell this was like their third interview with these people. So they wanted him for something, right? They knew they liked what it was. So then he started asking questions literally about, well, what did you have in mind? What is your vision here? What are your policies and procedures surrounding these issues? What do you guys, and he asked several questions, and no one could actually answer them, meaning they didn't know, they didn't have answers. So guess what that turned into? They went, all right, we're going to give you a call back in a couple of weeks. So they created a position to onboard him basically as like a 6-month sort of probationary thing to get that program management job. But guess what his first role is? To find out what all of those things are for the company so he could write the standard operating procedures and come up with these policies. And it was like just an amazing thing where, both people had the wherewithal to go, all right, well, yeah, I understand. Everyone knew where they fit in the situation, right? And everyone was honest about where they were at, as a company and as the individual applying. And it turned into what I think is going to be I'm super excited about it for that person, but because that's such a cool role. So when you get into those behavior-based stuff, when you're the person being interviewed too, you can ask that and find out what, are they just trying to fill an immediate need because they have a line item that they can charge for and they need to put someone in that position? Or is this going to lead to something bigger? What are the expectations there? And you being interviewed can kind of find that out from that hiring manager, and you'll get a lot of information by asking those type of questions to them too.
Right.
Yeah, Brian, I think that's true. And actually, again, like a lot of people don't think about it this way, but as the interviewee, right, the person coming in for the role, like you should consider behavioral based questions to verify and validate the stuff that you know about the company.
Precisely.
So, I'll point at myself, right? Like I didn't do proper due diligence on one of my jobs in my career. I took the word of a friend that it was an awesome place to work, and it ended up going really badly. And if I had done just a modicum of due diligence or ask these behavioral based questions, like, can you give me an example of, your cultural value X, and how you reinforce it through your operations here? Right. A good manager should be doing something around that, and they should have a story tip of the tongue.
Yeah.
And if they don't, it means it's probably a lot of lip service.
Exactly. Or it's so out of their ken
Yeah.
that they're not going to normally deal with it, and it's not the right person to be interviewing you anyway. Right. I love that. That's good.
Yeah. I had a good one
Yeah.
too.
The other thing that, sorry,
Please
Brian,
go ahead, Clark.
No, I was just a funny one because it was someone being interviewed and they had horrible, they're like, yeah, they have horrible ADHD and they have all these issues with it. And so their guys would ask them like, well, what's your biggest strength? He's like, well, I actually work really well under pressure. And it's like, okay, well, what's your biggest weakness? If I don't have pressure, I literally can't get anything done and I don't work. It was like, so honest
daily
and
you have to come in
hilarious.
and light me on fire.
Yeah, it's like
Or
pretty
I'm not-
much just tell
exactly.
me this has to get done right now and it's gonna get done.
All
But
the
other
time,
than that,
everything, the house has to be falling apart or I'm
Yeah.
worthless.
So sorry,
that's
I'll go
great.
back to you.
So
I'll go back to you.
so it's as a hiring manager, one of the tactics, kind of along those lines is during those behavioral based questions, right? Try and keep them like real open ended. And then there's this move that I've heard called the baby nod, and it's a slight yes and no motion with your head. And it's not yes, I agree. It's yes, I'm following you.
Yeah.
Right. But it gives energy into that equation and they keep going. And we've talked about kind of taking the pause and just leaving the silence in the room. And people want to fill that silence. Like everyone has this desire to like make the noise start again. And so if you could just nod and then pause, you'll get so much more detail. And the nod to people who aren't attuned to it, oftentimes like they interpret it as agreement, and they will just dig deeper and deeper into that hole. I've had people say, you ask the question like, you've had a disagreement with your coworker, how did you handle it, right? And they're going down, and you're just like, wow, I'm never hiring you again, but you're just smiling and just nodding gently and just seeing where it
Exactly.
goes.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the Austin Powers.
That's
I like what you've done here on the
yeah.
contract. So two things on that. One, the self-same things that we're discussing now, folks. If you happen to be in law enforcement and you're conducting an interview of a suspect before an interrogation, or you're in the interrogation, number one cardinal rule after you've set up and done the background, exactly what everybody's talking, and set up the room, is shut up. Once you've asked that question, allow that person to go, and then give the Brian and then with the eyebrow raised, and then they'll keep talking, and that's where you're going to learn it. And Clark, I would tell you about due diligence. I would tell you that we've worked with companies and for companies that were our clients, where we came in and they had no idea why they wanted us. And the person they assigned to show us around had no idea who we were. Those never work out well, and we never hear from them again. Now, we've had others where it was just hand in glove, and it was like, wow, I'm reading your mind, and we're still friends with them decades later. One, a major airline, let's call it, or train company, because I don't want to get sued, or people in the backyard that you don't know. And Brian was up in front speaking, and Brian was making a couple of comments on, how do you embody the logo, literally the logo art of your company? And Brian talked about shapes and colors and everything else. And we took a break. And the lead dogs in the sled, the strategic layer, came over to Brian and goes, that was amazing. How did you find that out? And he said, it's on your website, literally under our mission, and Brian pointed to where he got it. So don't have lip service. People will resent it. People will think less of you. I tell you what, if you don't know, come up and, the old knowing what we know now. If you come up and you say, hey, listen, I'm not sure, but I'll look into that, I will have better respect for you than you start going down the rabbit hole and creating shit as you're moving along. Just not a fan of that dancing your way off stage like Snagglepuss. Exit stage left. That's hilarious shit.
Yeah, no, the go on is always a good one with someone's talk. And Clark, it was funny because you were talking about like the nod, like we do that, in class, kind of teaching a lot. Because we're trying to keep it positive, and there's certain times we play with electrochemical neurotransmitters. You've seen it, where we get people upset and then happy and laughing, and then, oh man, that's really sad. But that's all kind of designed that way. And we had one student, Greg was up there teaching, and he kind of asked a question to the class, and this kid he just shouted out just a horribly
and
wrong
it's
answer.
rhetorical. Everybody else knew it was rhetorical,
and he just shouted out, like, literally, he was like, shoehorn. It was something like, and Greg did the nod and did the, I see where you're going there, but what if it's this? And was the exact opposite of what he said. But it allowed him to not feel like, he just got told, you're absolutely wrong, please shut your mouth.
And he was hanging on every word, Brian. He was literally hanging on every word. And so you try to get the group think going and go, look, we have to solve for X. And he was just screaming answers. We loved that kid.
For the audience's benefit, this is actually a story about me. They're telling me this story.
That's great. That's great. And I want to throw in one sort of a sidebar, and we can answer it in kind or just leave it hanging like Chad. I think there's a difference between hiring and recruiting. I think not just the published definition. And I think one of the projects Brian and I are working on now is for a part of the Department of Defense, Marine Corps, and helping them align their recruiting in a manner where they're getting the best out of it, and more efficient and
more effective. Yeah.
And saying, hey, these 3 kids are likely to follow up, so let me put most of my calories and energies there. And I think business is not unlike the military. And I think police work and law enforcement needs to be more like a professionally run business. What are your thoughts on it, Clark? Am I way off the mark?
No, and I think one of the things that I tell startup founders is recruiting and hiring is the most important job for you, right? Like, as the person at the top of the organization, you shouldn't be mired in the day-to-day. You should be the culture carrier, and you should be spending most of your time finding the best people on the planet to solve the problem that you're trying to solve, from their domain of expertise. And so it really comes down from a recruiting standpoint, is figuring out how to target those individuals, which I think is, again, can bring some of the skill sets that maybe people have from law enforcement or the military, like to bear, right? I do a lot of work on LinkedIn, parsing through people's connections, looking through their work history, trying to find the person who literally just left the job that I want to hire them for, right? So if you're a software as a service business that makes I don't know, a CRM for dog kennels, right? You want to go find someone who just finished just exited building a CRM for cat cafes, right? And you want to bring them in because they know the industry, they understand how it works, and that's really the game. And so using that analysis and then using those connections, right? The value. I mean, when we talk about open source intelligence, like,
yes,
it's amazing what's out there and what's available and how long we've been using it for.
Without that name OSINT, right?
Yeah.
Without assigning that value and saying this is a new thing to data mine. Smart people have been using it for a long damn time. Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, to incriminate myself, I got a BlackBerry my senior year of undergrad, which was like 2007. And I was at parties looking up people's Facebook profiles so that I could see what bands they liked that I knew, so I could go in and just randomly start talking about that band in front of them.
So I've used my knowledge of OSINT and social media to get a restraining order against Emily Bowman from Braid Babes. Now, the reason I got the restraining order, she wouldn't know me from Simon, right? She would not know me if she fell on me. But the idea is that I can show people, I go, oh yeah, man, she's constantly on, on transmit, sending me messages and stuff. She's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And that whole thing, that the Braid Babes connection, there's a few, I hate to use the word influencers because I really don't know what it means, but there's a few people that influence how I see LinkedIn. You're definitely one of them. Shout out to Rena Friedman Watts, because she has, Rena Friedman Watts likes to come in, tip over the gosh damn apple cart, let the dishes go scattering and go, so there. And that's her post. And you got to dig a little deeper and you got to go, what's up? Who is this person? And I love those kind of people, and there's the ones that I pass all the time. Like you did a quiz the other day. I actually saw it on there, not a quiz, a poll, whatever they're called. But there's one guy that does them all the time. And it's like useless shit just to keep the numbers up, just to keep the algorithm going. And
the algorithm.
Come on, it's like, so I love what you do, because you're so much smarter than people. You could be intimidating them, yet you motivate them to be their best them. I'm not that smart, so I can't do that. So I usually do it with a whip and a chain. I'm sort of the stick, not the carrot stick guy. And then Brian has no soul or emotions. So Brian does it literally with his choice of wardrobe and his hair products. We can go through an airport, and I've never been with Brian in an airport where 3 or 4 people didn't stop and go, hey, where'd you get those pants? Or, hey, what do you use to get that, that coiffure? So you're like that, though.
That's in the classes. That's what I know. I'm in.
That is in the class too, though.
Special operations type A personality guys in the class, because they're always like, hey man, where'd you get those pants from? I'm like, that's the question. I just ran my mouth for 47 minutes straight
about how to find a bomb.
27 photos and 30 different things to write down, and that's your question. All right, I got them here.
Well, it's because everyone who attends your class only knows to buy pants from 511, so they're wondering what Brooks Brothers is.
But aren't you right?
Can you concealed carry in them?
So we were up at a place that shall remain nameless in the northern part of California, working with operators. And you guys both know what Dickies are, right? The pants, the company.
Yeah.
So our first pants for class, because we had a very casual thing, polo shirt and pants on this, red long sleeve shirt on range day. Why? So I can find you. Everything made sense. Everything was very simple. And the Dickies, why? Because we're very demonstrative in class, and you're kneeling down and jumping on shit and crossing tables. And so all of a sudden we started noticing all the other contractors did it. And we were like, you bastards, the ones that attended our course. So we went out, and 511 was just starting up. 511 had been golf, sporting goods, police work only kind of stuff. And so we went out and we got those. Well, then everybody was a 511 cowboy. So we, not wanting to build 512, Then we went to corporate. We said, okay, everybody with slacks and, you know, collared shirts and suit coats. And they go, Greg, you've never worn a suit coat in your life. That's the point. That's the point. It's almost a joke on itself now.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn anything from our class by dressing like us, you know, but they were so shallow. They didn't understand that. It's the boots. They're wearing new boots, you know, and we'd laugh and laugh, bastards.
While we're telling funny 511 stories, I was at SHOT Show a decade ago, and I was there with a Master Chief, and we went up to the booth, and he's talking to one of the reps, and he's like, "Hey, can we get these bags in anything other than black? Because when I roll through with a platoon full of SEALs, it's kind of obvious when we all have the same bag, you know, like
the SHOT Show one is perfect because how many people actually know it stands for shooting, hunting, and outdoor trade?
None of the people that go.
That's what SHOT Show is.
I show up in Iraq, and it was my first trip into kinetic Iraq. And I've got my orange bag and I've got my orange notebook. I went to pink because back then you couldn't get a lot of pink, and now pink is available everywhere. And I love pink. So everything has orange and orange tape on it. And all these people that I'm embedded with, they're all going, you're going to get us killed. They're going to target in on that orange. Yeah, they are. Okay, no problem whatsoever. Where I was, what I was doing, it was so I was first off the plane, and I could always see my shit. So operationally, I'm not saying go on patrol and wave around your orange shit, but most of us value, like Under Armour, most of us value stuff that we're never, ever going to use. Or Teva sandals. You remember the Teva sandal? You have to have the secure Teva sandal because they'll get sucked right off of you when you jump out of a plane. Who's jumping out of a plane with Teva sandals? I'm just asking. You know, it's just stupid shit that people do because they want to be a member of an elite club that they would never be allowed into any other day. Or they're really in the club and they don't think that they're on transmit, right? There are some people that are massively into the club and they don't think that we're in the public place. They're going to stick out like a sore dick. So black is not always the best color to buy your stuff, and I would agree.
No. So let's pivot back a little bit to kind of LinkedIn and other OSINT tools. So again, here's another little software gem. If you haven't played with it, there's a piece of software for OSINT called Maltego. Probably saying it wrong, but Maltego, and it allows you to quickly like create social graphs and then pivot around them, right? So you can build the old copper murder board with, you know, yarn and photos, but you're doing it all digitally. It makes it easy to transmit.
Yeah.
And then you can, you know, for instance, like find a social profile. And then when you're going through that social profile, like maybe their email address has a username, and then you can pivot on that username and see if it's used anywhere else in social media. And that's a tool, like it sounds, you know, like something I'd be doing in an investigation, but it's a tool that I've used as part of a due diligence process when hiring people, because you can go look for their alt accounts and see, are they a good human? Right? Yeah. Like, is he a part of a knitting club or some, you know, secessionist movement?
Decapitation photos are probably a good, you know, bellwether moment when you find those. So.
And you're bringing up, you know, the greater point in all this, no matter what detail you go into, like you have to do some sort of due diligence, and like you have, you know what I mean? Like into who you're hiring and what you're doing and, you know, where you're going or what company you're working with. I mean, you're bringing up these great tools, but like, you have to start somewhere. You have to look. I mean, we've been in places where all of a sudden someone wanted to question like who we were or whatever. And I'm like, hey man, like if you haven't done that already and we're already here, like you failed miserably. Like this is not like our stuff is all out there. You can vet us however you want. Yeah. Or the other thing is, you know, when someone does a, well, yeah, can you send me some references? It's like, yeah, I can. But do you want me just to tell you what they're going to say right now?
Right.
Because I'm not going to send you. I'm not going to send you someone that says that I suck. You know.
So, no. But OSINT's been around forever. So it's just how we process information. So when Friedrich Nietzsche said, "Beware when you look into the abyss also looks into you." That's OSINT. So everything that you're transmitting out there can be received by somebody, and everything that you're receiving out there, somebody can know that you're receiving it. They can spam the net. They can do a bunch of different things. But I like your point, because we have that wall, even though, you know, I don't have a Facebook. I don't have any of this social media stuff. But, you know, I have things that are important to me. When I come to class, I hang them on my PowerPoint, or I have them duct taped to my luggage, you know, my family or my dog or my kids. And we don't think that sometimes with that also comes different things like guns and booze, you know what I'm saying? And Brian and I were laughing recently where somebody that was in the executive and dignitary protection hub of LinkedIn was saying, look, even if we don't take your application, we'll look you up and check out the photos that are on your sites.
Yeah.
And if you got any photos with clients, any photos with guns, any photos with airplanes in the background, we're going to ban you for life. You're never, ever going to get a job with our company. But that's a great message, because in that realm, you shouldn't be doing that shit. You know, we talk a lot about where we're going on Patreon so we can get more people at the class, but we don't talk about, you know, we just got back from St. Louis till we just get back from St. Louis, because we also don't want to have that, you know, that our type of entourage doesn't carry cameras, if you know what I'm saying. They'll be carrying sticks and clubs and torches and pitchforks.
There was a moment at the after hours where I was talking to one of the attendees of the class, and the sentence "I could kill you with any object in this room" came out of his mouth at one point. So I could verify that.
Yeah,
that's so funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that and the well, I won't go into that. Brian, let's get back to that list, because Clark, you really took time with the list, and I really love it.
Yeah, well, yeah. You know, you're this is kind of leading into, actually, I want to hit that next one, the third one, about you asked about, you know, how do you build cross-functional teams that repeatedly innovate. So I know cross-functional teams have a couple different definitions out there that I've seen, but you know, we talk about it from how do you get one group to work with another, and that interoperability. And we like to use sort of the analogy Greg always talks about, you know, you got to be like Velcro. So we come together and we got this really strong, you know, relationship or really strong team ethic, but I have to be able to separate from your team, Clark, and go attach onto someone else sometime, right? And so what we look at it is, you know, in a structure of a business or military law enforcement is what it is. You know, they're typically some sort of hierarchical structure. Some of them might be a little bit more flat in design, and people have more autonomy, but you still have some sort of chain of command and different levels, right? And so, you know, everyone tries to define them. We got like the tactical level, we got the operational level, we got the strategic level, and you know, the real issue is they're not always clearly defined, or your roles may overlap. So we look at it almost as like pieces of the puzzle. So your team is one puzzle piece, and typically what we see is that team usually gets really good, right? You're going to work together, you're going to get really high functioning, you're moving fast. But the problems arise is the seams and gaps when you have to go connect with that other team, because the puzzle piece doesn't always fit together neatly, right? So we say, all right, look,
hence the Velcro.
Most, you know, especially like, you know, you got a military special operations team, or like, you know, a team, you know, that of entrepreneurs or tech guys that like really, or girls, whatever, but that are really hardworking and love what they do. They're going to innovate, and they're going to work together really well, and they're going to get a good process going, right? So what typically we have to work with them on is like, you're fine internally. It's turning around, looking outboard where those seams and gaps are. What are those connection pieces? And that's when it gets into the communication and how you articulate things, because that's where all problems arise. It's when I have to go figure out a problem with another team or another person, right? So that's kind of how we look at it. But you know, to get to your question about how do you repeatedly innovate, I mean, you're by consistently getting challenged, or you know what I'm saying? So innovation comes out of necessity, right? Innovation is you know, it's in our DNA as humans, because we've had to innovate to stay alive. So everyone innovates in some way. Maybe it's a very low organized, low level sophistication way, but typically people will find ways to make their life or their job easier, and that's sort of an innovation process on its own. So you kind of have to let people do that, right?
I would add one more gating mechanism to Brian's comment, Clark, before I turn it over to you. And this isn't our first rodeo. We've done vulnerability assessments for years and years and years with a lot of different companies, some very high functioning, very lean forward, you know, companies, and some that are just broken and are never going to be fixed. And the common thread when we interviewed those teams is, we've got it going on, but that team, they're the ones that are holding us down. Then we go talk to that team and they go, hey, we're the most innovative and resilient team here. But those guys back there, and they never want to shine the lens in the mirror. They never want to look at themselves first. So we're very interested in how you would see that.
Or as Taylor Swift would say, I'll stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror.
Wow. Is that a lyric?
Love it.
It is.
Oh my God.
So, but yeah,
I had
to
no
get
idea
just
that
like,
Brian's a Swiftie. We just
yeah.
learned something.
So, but to go to how do you repeatedly innovate is, removing barriers and allowing people to do that, right? As long as I have a clear understanding of what the mission is, what we're trying to accomplish, what we would call the commander's intent, whoever is in charge, here's what I want you to do, here's my intent behind it. People will innovate, and depending on how they are, or how creative they are, what they think, or and their experience is what they'll do. But at a minimum level, like most places you can walk into, and any employee will tell you what the problems are, right? They might not offer solutions, or they might not know the big picture, but they can tell you in their world what the problem is. Yeah, I could get more done, but here's the thing. Every time I got to interact with this part over here, I got to fill out extra paperwork, and then I got to file that. So I never end up getting to this part over here. So it's not an issue of me working harder. I just can't go do that until I get approval from this person over here who's, and they'll tell you what it is. Now, to come up with a process or fix it, it might be very difficult depending on how complex the issue is. But at least having, listening to those team members, listening to the people in the organization to see what the barriers to their success are. And especially as a leader and a manager, like, it's just about getting rid of those. Like, if you just get rid of those, because then what you do is you'll see who the performers are. They're going to work their ass off, that really want to go after it. And you'll see the people that are just going to do the bare minimum, or always come back to you for help because they're not figuring it out. So it really allows you to kind of gauge where everyone's at, if that makes sense. So I kind of want to answer the question, but it's a tough question to ask without like sort of a specific kind of case study. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it from my approach in the business world. Is when I talk to people about innovation who aren't in the, we'll say, startup world or community, or they think of it as building a better mousetrap and inventing it from whole cloth, when really the vast majority of innovation in the world is taking a known solution from a problem domain that is adjacent to yours and copying and pasting over, and then sanding off the rough edges.
Yep.
Right.
Precisely.
And so when we talk about repeatedly innovating as a team, there's a process to it. Research, right?
Mhm.
What are similar problems in other domains, and what are their solutions? Talking to the people that have implemented those at their companies or in their field office or whatever, and figure out how that was applied, and then creating a rough draft, right, that is probably 80 or 90% from someone else's solution, and then going and testing it or putting it out in front of your customer, right, and getting that feedback. Because a lot of people who don't work in the innovation space, they follow this kind of like waterfall method, where it's like, we're going to do all the requirements gathering, then we're going to design it, then we're going to build it, then we're going to test it. And then, and this ends up being like a 2-year process, and you get to the end and you realize that your requirements were off or your design was bad out of the gates, and now you have an unusable solution. So a lot of innovation is this iterative process of, to your point, Brian and Greg, of like feeling the pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell folks, if you are proud of the first thing you shipped, you waited too long, right?
Mm.
Like, you should be embarrassed of the product that you're putting out on the street when you start, because that's how you achieve product market fit. Is you
Right.
put it in front of them, they tell you what sucks, you fix the thing that sucks, you put it back in front of them, they tell you what sucks, you fix the thing that sucks, rinse, repeat. And that is how you innovate. And as you're doing that, document it along the way, and keep going. So another key mistake that I see is people try and ideate in the group. Any design process that I run, everyone who attends the design meeting has homework, pre-work before the meeting, and they have to come with their own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that meeting session is about documenting those ideas in front of everyone, right? And getting any iterations or spin-ups that people have when they see your ideas. Oh, that's a great idea. What if? And then trying to down select. And there's another process that we use where we take all the requirements and we weight them. We say, out of 100% of our points, this requirement's worth 30% of those points. And then hide that weighting and then go score everything, right? On another like 1 to 5 scale. Where does this fall? And then you end up with these answers to like, what is the best solution across our weighting, as opposed to what do I feel good about? And it doesn't mean that you have to execute on that, but it gives you a good lens to have a discussion. A lot of times, like all humans, I'll just back my gut check with data that I find, right? Even if I went through this whole process. But what it forces you to do is have a discussion and think of like, why is it? Why do I feel so strongly this way if my data shows a different answer?
Yeah, I love that. So I'll go back to the street for the listeners that aren't as smart as Clark and Brian and give you some tangible examples that I found just in stuff like team selection. So I'll give you a quick example in our teams that had to be fully functioning 6-person teams, go anywhere in the world and just hit it and go. And so we were given challenges every day by our owners, let's call them, and managers back then, because they would just throw the team together like Plinko and say, go. And so I'll give you a perfect example. You got Jimmy Choo and Shelly, two people that you may know or you may not know, that are the best drivers I've ever seen in my entire life. The problem is that Jimmy Choo, even when we're driving from the hotel to dinner, always drives at top rate, precision maneuvering and everything else. And when you get there, you're always like, holy shit, hanging onto the vehicle. Okay. With Shelly, it's exactly the opposite. Shelly's measured and tempered, and, she does this. So if you don't have that right mix, you show up sweating. Then we go to a place and we're giving very simple advice to a client. And we recently had somebody tell us the key to clients, and I'll have Brian tell you that because they just sized it up perfectly. But we went to a company and there were 3 glaring abnormalities we noticed. First, and I notice this everywhere we go, smokers ruin your security screening net, because smokers will prop open a door at the most secure location because it's close and they can see the cash register and everything, and all stand there and smoke, and that's your way in. If you have access, you have way in to everything. And we tell people that. The second thing was, in this company, everybody carried box cutters on their belt, so that it was very routine to leave their open box cutter laying on a desk somewhere. And you know what? That's asking for trouble. Those are items that can be used as weapons or impact weapons, those type of things that if they're in your environment, they got to be controlled. Because if not, there's that one day that everything else was going right, but then you have the argument, what's the first thing you covet, Clarice? And then the final thing was that we made the simplest observation at one company. From 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 3:30 in the afternoon, the light for the receptionist was at such an angle coming through this big crystal cathedral thing that was in the front that she got a permanent tan, and she couldn't see the people that were coming in the door that she was supposed to security screen. So in the one, we told, put the box cutters away. In the second, we said, they make these wonderful screens you can put up there that go up and come down for the sun. And in the third, we said, don't prop those doors open. We might as well have told those people, kiss the fattest part of my ass, because they bucked back. They were coming like, well, you don't know our team and you don't know the inner workings, and we can't tell our folks not to do that. Look, welcome introspection. Welcome somebody from outside taking a look at how your team functions, because if not, you're headed for a fall, and you're riding for a fall if you're a cowboy, because what happens is you get so tied in to your team and who does what and who functions that you think you're interoperable, but you're not. The day that person doesn't show up, the minute that thing goes horribly sideways, you don't have any more critical thinkers, Clark. And I see that from the ground perspective. You guys are really smart, and you can, like, Hoberman and spin the wheel. I'm not that smart, so I got to really step on it or bite it, right? Or, bend the nickel with my tooth to see it. But I see it happen over and over again. Too much faith in your team, not enough forward-thinking or resilient people in your team, and you should spend as much time on team selection, just like dojo selection. How long should you spend on picking the right martial arts dojo? Your entire life, because that's the way you've got to be. So I'm sorry to go long, but when you guys are talking, in my brain, I'm thinking functioning with 6 people at the highest level isn't an easy task, and they're certainly not making it easier.
So a couple things, maybe build on, but also push back just slightly. And it's not even against what you said. It's just how it ends up coming out in the sauce, right?
Sure.
Is one, I think it's for innovative teams, it's important to build diverse teams, right? People from different backgrounds, different experiences. A lot of times when you look at these like highest performing teams, they tend to look like a monoculture, right? And so even if you can't, you know, and I know in the military, maybe there's selection courses and things like that provide some sort of bias, but there's also, we have to look at ourselves always as an organization. We are biasing the hiring process as well, right?
Yep,
We as humans like people that look like they're part of our tribe.
Yep.
And so it's very important to put in, like, there's statistics, and, you know, I'm going to make them up because we're on a podcast, but like, if there's, you know, 0 women on a hiring panel, there's about a 0% chance you're going to hire the female candidate. If there's 1, it increases to like 50%. If there's, you know, and it gets like, so it's just like making sure there's representation. And I've had to work with this with some of my engineers. You know, very male dominated field, and I'm always trying to bring in these different viewpoints. And I've had hiring selections where I was like, it's going to go to the female candidate, and all of a sudden they bring me the male candidate, and I'm like, why did you do this? Like, what does this person bring that the other person doesn't? And I have to literally like go through all of our requirements that we set out prior to the hiring process and score them against each other and talk through the candidate's response with them, and they go, oh, she was the better candidate. And I go, you know, like,
yeah.
but that's built in. Like, we have biases, and you have to understand that. So the next thing that I want to talk about with that idea of the monoculture is, you know, again, in these early stage teams in a company, when you're bringing people together, there's this feeling of, you know, we should all have the same ideas and value systems. We should all like work the same way. And that's also very dangerous. When I think of culture on a team, it's not what it is, it's what it should be, right? So creating a little matrix of high and low, and then figuring out where you have gaps, right? So a lot of times on early stage teams, the bias for the group tends to be towards optimists, right? Because the people who work on creative and processes oftentimes believe in the impossible. So I'm always looking for the capable devil's advocate, who is the curmudgeon
Certainly.
that always thinks everything's going to fail,
Yeah.
but can do it in a way where they're attacking the idea and not the person. And I try my hardest to slot them on an early stage team, because what it does is it brings us back into the realm of the real. And I think that is really, really important. And the last thing, and this, you know, this is a callback to earlier conversation, but Brian was saying most of the failures happen at the interfaces, and I completely agree. And that could be inside your own organization, right? Accounting to program management, you know, program management to marketing. But it can also be with your partners, and it can be within, like, you know, sometimes I build product, right? So we'll have hardware, design, human factors, software, you know, and these are the teams within the teams. Now, one of the biggest takeaways I took from Stanley McChrystal's book was give up your best to the other team, right? And so it can't be the manager. It has to be like the team lead, like the person who is the rock for your team has to go attend wherever the friction is right now, has to go be in their meeting, right? Because we need a representative who is the best communicator, who understands the concept at the highest level, and, you know, can represent the organization or their organization, their team within the team, the most fluently. And I think those are keys to having this innovation process. And the last thing with as a manager or a team leader within an organization, realizing that there's different behavioral characteristics. Like, some people are quick on their feet and will zip back with a response, and that will bias, again, your selection process, because other people think slow, right? Or they're not as willing to throw their idea out on the table. And so making sure you take time, again, I'm always sitting there kind of with the notepad. Hey, Cheryl hasn't said anything in this meeting. I'm going to make sure that I carve out 2 to 5 minutes at the end of the meeting for her to talk after she's processed, thought through it, you know, and been asked to engage by the facilitator.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference as well, because otherwise you're losing all this value just because it's outside of someone's comfort zone, and, you know, even though they want to contribute.
So let's talk about a real life application of what you just talked about, Clark. Both Brian and I, in one way or the other, have worked under the general in some capacity, because he was a leader of the task force when both of us were in. And one of the things is he was very efficient and very effective. But I will tell you, it's against every human nature to send your best and brightest What you want to do is you want to look and say, Brian is my best and brightest, but I can't send him because I rely so heavily. And Clark is my second best and brightest, but I can't send him because he's got all these projects in the air and who's going to do them for him. So I look and I go, well, I don't want to send that second team lead because that team is really just building and growing. So I end up sending some E5 or E6 that's nominal at best. And I send them routinely to this stuff, and I'm not getting the feedback I want. And I don't see that I failed by not, sending somebody that was going to prosper not only for that other team and give them the best, but then come back and give me when I ask somebody to read the tea leaves, if I ask a nominal person to read the tea leaves, I'm not going to get all the information out of that meeting. And the second point there is the second foot falling. You can't attend everything yourself. As much as you'd like to be on every Zoom and be at every meeting, and be the integral part there, you can't. You got to let the process work. And if the process is fundamentally sound, then you're going to be able to draw reasonable conclusions on the stuff they bring you. Totally agree.
You brought up a number of good points, and man, you could unpack everything you just said on an entire episode, really, because you get into especially what people call culture, and a lot of these issues, it's really comes, and you can boil everything down almost to leadership and how you do that. Like you just said, you brought up what we all have different biases, and we all have different perspectives, and so diversity sometimes can't always be articulated in a nice and neat way. Okay, we need a female who's within these ranges, we need a male who's within this from this, but it's like you can't do that. That's not how that works. And so you have to look at what diverse backgrounds. Where did you come from? What is your age and where you grew up, and those things, how you approach problems. There's different ways to define what that is, and how, and let it influence the culture, in a positive manner, because like you just said, if that culture is defined too by the leader, right? I've seen, people who were just really, really, really good leaders, just implicitly and explicitly, even if they couldn't articulate it, everyone just fell into line because they knew that person was fair, they were tough, they were demanding, but they were supportive. They had all of those things that they did, and none of that stuff mattered because they had people working for them that understood that. It's like I said about removing barriers and everything earlier. There's like, if you set the grounds you set the conditions for where you are, if you're in charge, and then it's up to those people to pick up the ball and run with it, and most people will. And so I love what you're talking about there too, is because it goes back to how we teach organizationally about human performance and human behavior. It's, hey, you have to give up your best person to go over there and figure that out, because that's more important. And if that person is really good, well, their team can probably handle things for a while on their own, because that person's so good, they set their team up for success and they know what they have to get done, right? So we're, like you said, we're not good. Humans in general are not good at, since probability and statistics is like a foreign language for every human being on the face of the earth, right? So we don't ever put the right solution in, or we don't pick the right thing because we don't see, if it's not right in front of us, we can't see how big a problem is sometimes. And it goes back to that interface, that seams and gaps, when they come together. That API is everything, because it pulls all the information together and all the people, and that's what makes it successful. That's why you have entire industries and companies that just do one little thing to connect dot A to dot B, and they exactly master that pathway right there, and that lets everything open up at the other ends to be this large funnel to let all the information go through. And that's the beauty of it. And if you just look at it from that process standpoint of how you're going to build it, man, I got to build that bridge has to last. I have to build that bridge to last, and it's got to be able to hold a lot of weight, right? Doesn't matter what's coming across it or what's on either side. I can have shaky ground there, but at this connection point, that's the most important point. And I think you kind of summed that up in everything you said. So I love it, but there's so much.
Wouldn't you add to though? Listen, let's be realist, and this goes back to my Seattle Seahawks image. You also sometimes have to play the hand you're dealt.
Yeah.
So as much as intelligence preparation in the battlefield is essential, and as much as predicting and forward thinking is, sometimes your sense make is going to be obstructed because somebody hands you a team and says, here is the team you're going to war with. And so I just think we all need to, make sure that we're not too big for our britches, that we acknowledge the fact that that sometimes our choices are made for us, and you can still influence and innovate and pivot in the moment. You don't have to be beholden to that and just ride that ride till it ends and then get off and then say, now I'm going to start again. You can influence in stride.
Yeah. So I want to, you brought up a lot more stuff on here. You have a few more questions, Clark, but I'm almost thinking that like we could do another episode on some of this stuff. And I want to, because the next part of your question sort of get into how we take a training changes behavior approach to everything, right? You can train your way out of a situation. If you don't have the skills or attitudes or aptitudes or abilities, you can get them. And then that team, like Greg said, suddenly your hand, it gets a lot better. It's the same people,
I think
right?
so.
Right. But you now know how to use it better. You know how to implement processes better and understand humans and what they can and can't do. And that's our big thing, because that's, it's a training is a force multiplier. It gets you better,
Exactly.
right, without adding weight to your rock. And I think, we could get into that. I did.
Well, and we also don't want to rush it. Clark, you're bringing up such great ideas, and that's fomenting an incredible conversation that I'm sure people are listening to. And so, if you would come back, Brian, I think that's a great thing too. There are incredible questions there.
Yeah. So
this is
yeah. So Clark, I definitely want to hit. I want to hit all of these other. You brought up a bunch more points, and then everything you talked about right now. I think we could do a second episode on that and get into some specifics, and maybe do a case study as an example of how you walk through that. Almost like, in this situation, this is how we apply that. And so, I did, though, want to understand your last question with your Harry Potter reference about Professor Snape,
Here we go.
social engineering. I kind of want to get I kind of wanted to see where you're going, because if you're listening, Clark goes, one of his questions was, what does Professor Snape have to do with social engineering? And I was like, well, my Harry Potter knowledge is only runs so deep. So I obviously know who Professor Snape is, and I know about his behavior and his attitude and how he treats Harry Potter, but I wasn't even sure what you were getting at with the question at first. So I do, can we at least answer that one, Greg, maybe, or get into
I
that?
think I love it. I'd love to hear it.
Well, I want to hear Greg's take, and then
Okay.
I'll give you my response.
So here's my take. I've grown up in my entire life in the shadow of my older brother, Brian. He's one of the smartest human beings I've ever met in my life. And although he projects himself as being the James Dean in every situation and everybody loves him, he is so introspective as to be a closeted nerd hiding in the basement surrounded by his items. And Brian, you've seen his room, so you know what I'm talking about. The only thing it doesn't have is a safe door. But he will go into a room and own the room and have these friends. All his friends are the same as he is. They would play Red Star, White Star late at night with a candle, with their 9-sided dice and shit that I don't know about, and come up with these great theories. So I have a sort of a bifurcated view of Snape. One, I couldn't get past that Snape was Hans Shoot the Glass. I mean, so he's my favorite Christmas movie ever, even though he irons his hair now and it's down to his shoulder. But the idea was that what always drew me to the books and to the movies that I saw waiting on a flight line somewhere was that Snape didn't want to be the potions leader. He was wanting to run the whole division on the dark arts. And that's why I loved that character. He was kind of behind the scenes, kind of quiet guy that knew all the answers and everything that you would put him into. But he was like, oh, just give me the guillotine. I'll handle your HR. I like that part of him. So I don't know. I'm probably way off base, but that was my take on
you
Professor.
You nailed it at the end there, right? So I think Professor Snape is an example, right, of defense against the dark arts, right? Like if you want to be the hero, and be able to cast these spells and save the world, like you have to know what the Op4 does, right, and how they attack, right? So so teaching social engineering to your team, to yourself, is very important, because then you can see when someone is attacking you, right? Like, because the whole context behind it is that these are subtle things that are built on evolved behavioral responses and cultural behavioral responses,
Certainly.
right? You're exploiting the cultural code to escalate privilege. And so, for those who don't have a background or understanding of social engineering, it breaks down into a couple things. At a high level, there's pretexting, which is creating a false identity or a scenario to gain trust and access to sensitive information. There's manipulation, which we're familiar with, right? Using psychological tricks to manipulate individuals into divulging sensitive information, maybe performing actions that compromise security. There's the concept of authority, right? And that's leveraging someone's perception of authority to get them to comply with the request, right? Impersonating a police officer, something along those lines. Urgency, right? This is a big one. This gets used a lot, and I'll make another nerd reference to this. But creating a sense of urgency or pressure to get an individual to act without fully thinking through the consequences of their actions. So this is my second nerd reference. When someone comes up to me with high urgency and a high rate of dialogue, on the street, I think to myself, like Captain Picard, I say, shields up, right? And shields up gives me mental time and space and slows down. And I shut down all of my trained cultural behavioral responses. Like they'll come up talking to me and they'll shove out their hand for a handshake. And, I put my hands up like this, right? In a non-aggressive but defensive posture, because I know that they're trying to escalate privilege, right? We shake hands, it means that we're friends, right? On a subconscious level. And so anyways, that's urgency, right? Slow things down, think through it. It's probably not real. Scarcity, making an individual believe that an opportunity is limited or that they'll miss out on something valuable if they don't act quickly, right? False scarcity is used in marketing all the time to get
every
people
day.
to the button.
Only two left. Get them now. You know what I mean?
Get them now. Buy in the next 5 minutes.
Yes.
Social proofing, right? We talked a little bit about this earlier, right? But using the actions of others to influence an individual's behavior, right? Like if you go to my website, the first thing I have right below my photo is all of the different articles and publications I've been in, right? Because I've had the opportunity to be in some large ones. And so that's social proofing. I'm drafting off of their brand value, right? And so people do this in a lot of different ways, and you have to be aware of it. And then empathy, right? Building rapport or trust by understanding and addressing the needs and concerns of the target, right? So, helping you, right? And you see that a lot in abusive relationships and things like that, where people start out with empathy and then they become the aggressor. And then the last one, and this is the most blunt one, but is fear, right? Creating fear or anxiety in an individual to comply with a request or take action. Right. So, in this case, it's someone calling you on the phone and saying, hey, I need you to do this right now, or I'm going to get fired and you're going to get fired and blah, blah, blah. Right. And they create both that sense of urgency and that sense of fear to get you to comply with the request. So, this is a deep, deep well, but I wanted to at least cover, some of the top, operational tactics.
But this is stuff that I'd like to unpack in the future episode as well, because what you just talked about, if we would take that and write it on acetate and put it over the Tyree Nichols caper, or put it over the Uvalde school, or put it over the Dairy Queen that closed in Gunnison a couple of years ago because their profit margins didn't meet statistical analysis. All of this works. This is how humans are. And so those examples were tangible examples, but I think we could give a bunch more and really deep dive some of that. So it's a great topic.
Yeah.
And I also love your metaphor. That I use television and movies because I grew up on TV and movies, and I really love that. Love reading some books. We each use a metaphor, and Snape is like a perfect metaphor because many people have either known about it or at least know enough about the series where they can get into it. It's a great question.
No, all right, yeah, that's a huge one to unpack. I think that might be a great starting point too for the for the next episode, because
we'll all dress like Snape for the YouTube site.
Well, because everything you brought up someone can use each one of those
in their own life,
and you can. Well, and everyone does it sometimes naturally without knowing it. Meaning sometimes people do that, but there's no intent behind it. That's who they are as a person. And all of those things that you brought up are great indicators that people can pick up on and go, wait a minute, is this really urgent, like you just said, or is this person trying to make me think it is? Because once you get good at identifying them, you can tell two things. You can tell the person that's trying to kind of scam you or get something over, and you can just tell whether that person's just almost being honest and they're just intent, they really
Whole
feel this is
episode, yeah.
urgent, and then you want to address their needs because it's someone that you have some sort of relationship with, right? So
Yeah.
it's great for all of those things, and you know, that's something that we could really go into detail about. So I love the reference and the Harry Potter reference, and well, in you know, Greg does the hero versus the anti-hero stuff all the time too, and say, hey, you got to be, you know, you can't be Darth Vader, you got to be Luke Skywalker, right? When we teach you this stuff about
I've
cognitive
never
manipulation,
used those words, but you're
you
exactly right.
have though.
That's exactly
So,
what it is, you know.
so and that's the idea, is like you're gonna use this and
Not a
understand it,
nerd,
then use it for good. And also it's funny because
but
when
you
I bring
could.
that stuff up, and if you get good at identifying that, you can tell when someone's literally trying to manipulate you into doing something, and then you get to call them on it and watch them turn into the Porky Pig. So
I want to add one thing there, you know, and this could be my point that I wrap on, but I think that it's very important as a leader to realize that no one is the antagonist in their own narrative,
That's
right? So we talked about the
absolutely
hero
true.
and the
love it,
anti-hero.
love it.
So learning to realize that this person, from their viewpoint, even if you disagree with it and you think they're the problem child right now, they believe that they're the protagonist. They're doing the right thing. And so as a leader, it's very important to listen and unpack that and try and figure out the solution, right? Great leaders sit in every chair around the table and look at the problem, right? You know, and look at it in the problem of the perspective of the person that they're observing.
Two things on your point, Clark, and then I'll shut up and let the smart people end this and bring it in for a landing. One, we say that in every course that we teach people. You're not John Wick, but you see yourself as John Wick in the film that you're watching. Nobody ever pauses it and goes, you see that guy back there bussing the table across the street at that French place? That's me. I bus tables. Everybody puts them as the key players in the movies. And something you said about 45 minutes ago that really struck true with me, and I'd love to bring it up too, Brian, next time, is you talk about everybody's going to build a better mousetrap. Well, there's a company, Victor, that built one in 1897. That son of a bitch still works perfectly. You know, it's a low level of sophistication, a highly organized tool, and by God, it works every day. So I'm that guy. I'm that street guy that likes to reach back, you know, into the box rather than just abandoning the box. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Clark. I know you and Brian talk all the time. You never get to talk to me because I'm the old slow one, but it's been a pleasure just talking to you and unpacking some of what you know.
Yeah, we
Thanks so
appreciate
much,
you
Greg.
coming on, man. Yeah, this is I'm looking forward to part two. So we're gonna have to schedule that and get you back on to go into detail about some of this and answer some of the questions too, because a lot of with the team work stuff, you know, we love talking about organizationally as well. So I appreciate you
Exactly.
coming on, man. Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
awesome.
Our favorite
Yeah, and thank you
C-suite
to your
executive.
audience.
Yeah, both of them are listening right now. So
I
he's been in a
appreciate
lot of
everyone who listens, and
publications.
I hope that they gain something out of this. I gain something out of every episode, and you know, I'm available. You can find me on LinkedIn, my website. You know, I'm the opposite of OPSEC. Like if you want to text
Yeah.
my phone number, you can find it right now. So you know, I'm out there. I'm available, but I know defense against the dark arts. I think I'm not dropping a challenge. Don't exploit me. But
That's great. And Brian, that's all going to be in the episode details,
Yeah,
right?
I'm gonna
For our
put all that
regular
in the episode
listeners.
details so they could link up with you and get a
Perfect.
hold of you, and I love your 5 sentence email format that you got going on. You know, that's great. Everyone's got to check that out for brevity and understanding. I love that because
It's
that's
a
me.
haiku.
That's me. It's like, look, I want to do 3 to 5 lines on this email to explain specifically what I need, because then the other end there's no other interpretation of what I mean. So I'll put all that in there so people get a hold of you. But I really appreciate you coming on, Clark. And thanks everyone for listening. You can always find out more on our Patreon side. And please don't forget that training changes behavior.